It's my nerd world. Welcome to it, a Star Wars podcast. On the show this week, a few weeks away from the debut of the Book of Boba Fett, and the promotion continues. Quite a few comments from Ming-Na Wen, who plays Fennec Shand on the show. We'll share that with you. More Ahsoka casting news, plus an interesting story about when Dune met Star Wars. The filming of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker and Dune was taking place at the same time. Got a rather interesting article that I'll share with you. Plus, some really good listener feedback that I'm looking forward to diving into. So let's get right to it. Thank you so much for joining the show this week.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My nerd world.
Just let it in.
It is my nerd world, a Star Wars podcast, and I am your host, Jon Justice. Glad you're with the show again this week. Remember, you can always email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment on YouTube if you happen to be listening or watching there. And if you don't like all the ads that YouTube injects into my videos, you can always go and find the podcast on wherever you go and listen to your podcast. Available on almost every single platform, including, I believe, Amazon.com now as well. Also, at Amazon is where you can pick up the EMBARK science fiction space opera series written by the voice you're hearing right now. Available in ebook, paperback, hardback, and audiobook, narrated by me. Go to mynerdworld.net for all of the info on the EMBARK series. So let's go ahead and dive right into the news this week. We're just a few weeks away from the debut of the Book of Boba Fett. A lot of promotion going on, getting a lot of different TV spots. Not really showing anything new. The general consensus on all the TV spots seems to be that these are more than likely coming from the first episode of the series, and I tend to agree. You can see quite a few of the characters in several shots that don't seem to be permanent characters in the show that take place in the majority of the different teasers. And this goes back into what I've talked about on the show before, that when it comes to the promotion of these shows, you know, Disney Plus knows the Star Wars fans are going to show up, and they don't want to give away too much ahead of time, you know, just enough to either add more subscribers or make sure that the Star Wars fans know what it is that they're getting into. And again, a lot of promotion going on, and we'll go ahead and we'll start off with quite a few different quotes from one of the actresses on the show.
Will you have a spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down?
I'm currently still in the middle of a rewatch of The Mandalorian, but you've been enjoying it more so now than I had, I think, before. And I don't know, that's always tough to say. I mean, I love Star Wars, right? And I guess there's some times when the content, when you watch it, just strikes a chord differently upon different viewings. And this time around, as I work my way through season 1, I'm just really enjoying the show and looking forward to every episode. Ming-Na Wen, who plays Fennec Shand, spoke with SFX magazine. Had quite a few things to say about what you can expect in the Book of Boba Fett. So we have a couple different sources here. So I'm going to go ahead and just give you all the sources now and run through everything that she's been saying. So Star Wars Newsnet has some quotes from Ming-Na Wen taken from the direct.com from an interview that she did. So got to give them some credit where credit is due, and also SFX magazine. So that's where the majority, or that's where all of these different quotes have been pulled from. As well as getting under Boba Fett's helmet, Wen promises the new show will delve more into the life of the bounty hunters in the show. As for the relationship between Boba Fett and Fennec Shand, in the Book of Boba Fett, there will be a lot of exploration of the dynamics between Fett and Shand, how they complement each other, and what they both get out of that relationship. Wen teases, he's someone she respects, and they definitely have bonded with They definitely bonded with him saving her. It allowed her to realize that she might be better off not being solo anymore. She sees her alliance with Boba Fett as a very smart move, in a sense that she'll have somebody watching her back. And even though it might be an extra baggage to have to align herself with someone else, the reward for her at that moment is greater. And Boba died, or we thought he did, in the Sarlacc pit, so I think that both of them share those near-death experiences in common. They both have a vulnerability that they understand. It's interesting, too, because in one of the TV spots, one of the opening shots is what appears to be Boba Fett. I believe he's in water, most likely a bacta tank. He's got a breathing apparatus on. Right before that shot, they show some Tusken Raiders walking through, looks to be like a sandstorm. And the implication there is obviously the Tusken Raiders rescued Boba Fett from the Sarlacc pit that we saw him so unceremoniously fall into at the end of Return of the Jedi. And again, you're sort of piecing things together. That's of course what the TV spot wants to portray. Who knows if that's actually what is going to play out. The comments here from Ming-Na Wen are interesting, because on the one hand, you kind of go, wow, she's giving up quite a bit of information about the relationship between these two. But on the other hand, what she's really giving you is the character study of Fennec Shand, which will obviously be on display within the show, but not necessarily played out in an explanatory form in the way that she did, right? You assume that Boba Fett and Fennec Shand, they both have worksheets of, this is your character's background. This is the dynamic between these two. And so what she's sharing here aren't necessarily spoilers for the show, in so much as they are just sort of details into the background of the dynamic of their relationship that we'll see play out on screen, but won't be spelled out in the way that she did as well. The Slave One name from the reporter. This is also a part of the SFS magazine. He says, Boba Fett, he's handy with his box of tricks Mandalorian suit, flies around in a very cool ship. Disney has rebranded Slave One as the Fire Spray for obvious reasons, the article says. Yeah, it's whatever. I'm not going to get into it. It'll always be Slave One to me. It was never said that in the show. I understand that. I think it's ridiculous. I will get into it. I think it's ridiculous that they feel the need to go and change the name, but whatever. Okay, that's fine. I'll tell you what, the one thing, I will say, one thing that actually bugs me more than the name change, not even really bugs me, but is the way that Slave One, because Slave One is in the prequel trilogy, right? It's got a different paint scheme, but it was originally Jango Fett's ship, right? Okay, so it was originally Jango Fett's ship. In Attack of the Clones, when there's the amazing asteroid battle between Obi-Wan Kenobi, Jango, and a young Boba Fett, one of the things that drives me a little nuts, and I know it's silly, is that when Boba Fett fires on Obi-Wan, he doesn't use the main guns that are at the very, the most prominent two double-barreled cannons. Right, they are double-barreled, right? I'm looking at my old one is single-barreled. I'm pretty sure. Oh, they're double-barreled. I've got my toys sitting over there on the shelf. They're double-barreled. He doesn't use, in the space fight, he doesn't use the double-barreled guns at the very bottom, at the very bottom of the nose of the ship. There's these two other secondary cannons that are about midway up just below the cockpit. And I know it's neither here nor there, but I just thought it was weird. It must have been the only thing I could think of, because I remember thinking this when I first saw Attack of the Clones. I'm like, that's really odd. I didn't know, one, there were guns on that part of the ship, and two, why aren't we just using the ones that we're so used to seeing? Boba Fett used them on Kamino during the battle, the lightsaber versus Mandalorian battle between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Jango Fett. He used those main cannons. The only thing I can think of is that during the space scene itself, perhaps using those double-barreled cannons at the bottom of the nose of the ship just didn't line up right in terms of the way that the chase was going down. If that makes sense. So if you've got Slave One chasing down the Jedi Starfighter and he's using those lower cannons, the ship would be positioned higher, and I'm wondering just in terms of the dynamics of the battle in and of itself if it would have looked awkward. I just thought it was strange. I had no idea that Slave One even had weapons right there, and like, why didn't they just use the main guns that are there? All right, back into the quotes from Ming-Na Wen. Possibly the show's biggest challenge, talking about Boba's mystique, is developing the character without destroying the mystique that's previously been integral to the Fett brand. And she says, yes, and that's where we kind of opened up too much. I'm sorry, this is where, this is Tamira Morrison that's actually commenting on this, my bad, who plays Boba Fett. And he says, yes, and that's where we kind of opened up too much of the can at times, I think, Morrison admits. I did have my reservations, but hey, I trust the people I work with. I was so lucky I had people like Dave Filoni, who has an ability to connect some of the dots, some of the ancient dots, and to keep that authenticity. I relied on him a lot because I'm not one of these actors that reads every comic book and every bounty hunter book. You know, what's interesting about this, though, is that the mystique of Boba Fett, right? I mean, we don't really, and we never really knew much about Boba Fett. And, you know, his popularity just kind of exploded. And Zach over on Knights of Vader made a really good comment. I don't know, it was a long time ago, but made a really good comment on his show about how Boba Fett looked cool. First off, it was the first toy and something new that we saw from The Empire Strikes Back for all of us little kids at the time who had, been introduced to Star Wars and were just like, oh my gosh, what is this amazing thing that we're watching right now? And became massive fans. Boba Fett was the first thing that we saw in terms of the toy. And then when you actually get to the movie, and then certainly you get into the dynamics of The Empire Strikes Back, and his reasoning of Boba Fett, and if I'm getting this wrong, Zach, I apologize, but, his reasoning was, Boba Fett was the guy that caught Han Solo. Essentially, right? He's the guy that ends up, Han Solo is this iconic character from this first movie, and Boba Fett is the bounty hunter that ends up, taking him after being frozen in carbonite to Jabba the Hutt's palace. And so that immediately cemented him in the minds of a lot of young kids as this formidable bounty hunter. But beyond that, we really never had any sort of background beyond our own interpretations of what Boba Fett, was for those of us who were huge fans. So look, I was a fan of Boba Fett. I'm not a huge fan. I got a poster, of Boba Fett, but it wasn't, it's not like one of my favorite characters ever. But I understand what it is that they're saying. They're going to have to expose this mystique now. They're going to have to tell you who Boba Fett is, and you are going to end up running headlong into, is this going to end up destroying preconceived notions of who Boba Fett was in the minds of these fans who have loved this character for years, even though they knew very little about his background apart from what is now considered legends. It was one of the arguments that I made early on as to why The Mandalorian wasn't about Boba Fett in the first place. You do The Mandalorian, and instead of doing IG-88, you do IG-11, and you've got a character that doesn't have any preconceived ideas attached to him, right? So you can kind of do whatever you want. You're not going to make anybody upset because this is a brand new character. He looks like a character that you loved and grew up loving, but it's a different character, and we can mold him to whatever it is, and hopefully you'll enjoy that character. Now they're actually getting into a character that people have known for a lot of years, but never knew a lot about, apart from what their own headcanon was. Answers about the 5 years gap. For all that preserving of Boba's enigmatic side is important, however, there are some things that we surely have to find out. In canon, there's a 5-year gap between Fett ending up in the Sarlacc pit and then reemerging in The Mandalorian. So, how did he free himself from that grisly digestive tract? And how did Marshal Cobb Vanth come into possession of his armor? If these questions remain unanswered, there'll surely be a rebellion in the streets of Mos Eisley, according to the magazine and beyond. there will definitely be a number of answers, teases Tamira Morrison, some long-winded answers, some short and sharp answers, some colorful, I don't know why I had a hard time saying that, answers. We're filling in a lot of gaps. Now we get into more of Ming-Na Wen from the Direct from Star Wars Newsnet, talking about, again, the partnership between the two of them, Fennec and Boba Fett for sure. They're bonded by the fact that they both lived through a near-death experience, and there's a sense of code that they both abide by. So it's really going to be interesting to see how their dynamics grow. I think that's all I can say. The rest is you have to watch. Not that they're bad guys, not that they're good either. We are the anti-hero. We like playing the anti-hero. You get away with more, I think. The conversation then shifted to Tamira Morrison and how much she loved working with him. And she said, Tamira is spectacular. In some way, he's the opposite of me, which is good because he's less of a nerd than I am. He appreciates the work that goes into everything, and I geek out about everything. And yeah, I mean, if you've seen Tamira Morrison and any of the other, he's an actor. And it's clear that he takes all the roles that he gets very, very seriously. I just think, look, I just think it's so cool that after all these years of the criticism of the prequels, right, which has changed quite a bit over the past few years with the release of the sequels, that took some pressure off of the pressure that was on the that was on the prequels, but. All those years ago, watching those prequels as a Star Wars fan and really enjoying those prequels, and then seeing this character, Jango Fett, how he came into prominence, how he died rather quickly, how, Boba Fett, his son, and then all these years later on to see the same actor coming and playing this character again, tying it all together, I just think that that's rad. I just think that that's one of the coolest things that Lucasfilm has done in really connecting these worlds together. And we're going to get more of that, obviously, with the Obi-Wan Kenobi series with Hayden Christensen coming back. It's going to be just a really, really exciting 2022. All right, let's get into a little bit more news.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
So, from Deadline, and I'm convinced that and maybe this is not even like a secret, but I'm convinced that Disney just feeds this stuff out to Deadline. It used to be Entertainment Weekly, but now I'm convinced that Disney is feeding this casting information out to Deadline, to the masses, unless Deadline's just doing their due diligence, which is possible. But Ivana Sakhono, who is probably most noted for being in the second Pacific Rim film, Uprising, small role there. She has been cast opposite Rosario Dawson and the recently announced Natasha Bordizzo in the Ahsoka series. The Ukrainian-born Sakhono is known for her roles in the movies Pacific Rim Uprising, The Spy Who Dumped Me, as well as an arc in the Hulu series High Fidelity. She's just finished up filming a starring role in the MGM International Limited series, The Reunion. That is all that was released from that. There's no word on who she's playing. I know a lot of individuals were immediately saying that she had Night Sister vibes. The Night Sisters from the Clone Wars, based off of her Ukrainian background and her look. And I could certainly see that, but, the truth of the matter is she could be playing anybody. And I don't think we've received any sort of official confirmation of the Night Sisters showing up in the Ahsoka series. Although there has been quite a bit of talk. Not quite a bit of talk. There has been some talk that the Ahsoka series is essentially going to end up kind of being another season of Rebels, where we could see a majority of the characters that we saw in Rebels, right? Sabine obviously being cast now, along with Ahsoka, going to look for Thrawn. We know that's going to be a key part of the show. And, we may see end up seeing what remains of the crew of the Ghost in the series. So there's a lot of talk that this could potentially be the next season 2 Rebels, in which case, an appearance from the Clone Wars, but you can definitely see how the Night Sisters could fit into that in some way. But like I said, she could be playing literally any character that they've come up with. So, all right, this is Star Wars and a bit Dune. I just thought it was a really cool story and wanted to share it on the show this week.
This is not going to go the way you think.
So the article comes from Gizmodo, and I loved Dune, by the way. I really, really did. I really enjoyed that film. Looking forward to. I'm bummed that it's not on HBO Max anymore. They took it off of streaming. It comes out next month on Blu-ray. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it. But just as a sort of a grand epic space opera, Denis Villeneuve just did a fantastic job with that movie. So Gizmodo has this really interesting article, and I thought you'd be interested to hear it. At this point, they write, most of us can agree that Denis Villeneuve made the impossible possible. He took Frank Herbert's legendary sci-fi book Dune and made it into a popular, digestible entertainment, a feat no one thought would ever happen. And yet, along the way, he had multiple obstacles, including one from a galaxy far, far away. Now, Denis Villeneuve joked in a new piece in The Hollywood Reporter, saying, "If you think about trying to do your own space opera today, I'm sorry, but you're blanked by the huge elephant in the room that is Star Wars." I love that quote, by the way, apart from the expletive that I cut out, because this is a family show. Because it's one of the motivating factors as to why I wrote my EMBARK series, especially book 1, is that I wanted to write a space opera, and I specifically chose to start the first book on Earth and make that story about how humanity had to leave Earth. Not a huge spoiler, that's what the book is about. So that I could tell a grander space opera tale out in space rather than starting in a unknown universe, because George has been there and done that. And Denis Villeneuve is right. If you're talking about doing your own space opera today, you got to deal with Star Wars. He's talking figuratively, of course, the article goes on to say, in multiple senses of the word, about how Star Wars has become so popular that any similar space opera, even ones that came along before Star Wars, such as Dune, John Carter, or Flash Gordon, now will forever be compared to Star Wars. And while making his Dune, the director found himself in direct competition with that other franchise. In the same Hollywood Reporter story, Villeneuve explains that while he and the production designer Patrice Vermette were scouting locations in a helicopter high over the Wadi Rum desert of Jordan, they spotted a lineup of over a dozen black SUVs driving around. This was the desert the director had dreamed about making Dune in since he was a child, and yet, as a filmmaker, he knew what those SUVs meant: another location scout. Vermette remembered that his friend Paul Inglis, who had worked with the Dune pair on Blade Runner 2049, was working on a yet-to-be-titled 9th Star Wars film, so he shot him a text. "Hey man, random question. Do you happen to be in Wadi Rum right now?" Vermette said. Inglis texted back with the bad news. "Yep, was that you who just flew over us? It was indeed that damned elephant called Star Wars." Thankfully, the story has a happy ending. A meeting was set between the Dune crew of Villeneuve and Vermette, as well as Inglis and the Star Wars crew at a hotel bar. "We told them, we don't want to know anything about your story, but let's protect both of us and make sure we don't end up shooting the exact same areas of the desert," Vermette said. "It was all cool." And so what was supposed to happen, that's what happened when the team behind Star Wars and Dune, when the team behind Dune and Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker walked into a bar. They compromised about shooting in different parts of the same vast, evocative desert. And you could read a lot more about this in the complete story in the Hollywood Reporter, but that was probably one of the most interesting tales out of it. I just really enjoyed I love documentaries, especially documentaries about films that I love. I mean, I've watched the Star Wars documentaries, all of them, multiple times. And, that is something that I just think is cool. I mean, that they're flying over, they see the black SUVs, they know it's a location scout, they text each other, hey, is that you down there? Yeah, hey, is that you up there? I just thought that was super cool and wanted to share it with you on this week's show.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, let's dive into the listener feedback portion of the show, and thank you to everybody who wrote in this week. Got some fantastic comments that I can't wait to dive into. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com is the email address, and of course you can again leave a comment up on YouTube. Elisa Rodriguez writes this: I'm all done with the sequel hate. It's the same thing over again like the prequels. I'm an old school fan, and I remember people not liking the Ewoks, and I heard a lot of Jedi had Muppets in it, which is in reference to the Jabba's Palace scene. This complaining is not new. Social media just gave these people a megaphone. Now they are saying the new Ghostbusters movie is the proper way to do a sequel featuring the original cast passing the baton, and that Star Wars fans got robbed. It never ends. But your podcast, My Nerd World, is always a breath of fresh air in the stale fandom. Thank you so much for the comments. I really do appreciate it. When I decided to do the show, it was purely just because I love Star Wars. And I follow the news every single week, and considering the fact that I was already a talk show host, full-time in my career, I figured it only made sense that I would go and do a Star Wars podcast. So thank you so much for that. All right, Salvador Mendez writes this: thanks for the good podcast! ! I always enjoy it very much. Thank you, Salvador, as well. I really just do appreciate the comments. I hope the Skywalker saga continues with the original ideas of George Lucas that they didn't include in the sequel trilogy. Boba Fett could play the type of character Maul was going to be. He is rising as a criminal gangster. The mysteries of the Force, the Wills, could be included. And Darth Talon, yes, as a new villain would be interesting. Ben Solo could return from death, and finish what Anakin started. Rey could continue her journey like Finn, and who knows how the Sith Eternal could do with Luke's hands, fingers crossed. All right, and again, thank you for that message there. And now we dive into Patrick. We haven't heard from Patrick in a while. Always good to hear from him, friend of the show. Hello, John. It's been a while. I've loved listening as usual to your show. With that said, I felt compelled to chime in on your topic from last week, which you've brought up a lot recently, and that is the direction of the new content and it containing mythology, as you put it. Normally, I typically find myself agreeing with a lot of your takes on Star Wars in general and the movies, but on this point, I have to disagree slightly. No, that's cool, man. It's no fun if you got to agree all the time. First, I'll say I agree that mythology and the use of the Force has been great in the sequel trilogy, and I look forward to more of that if and when it comes in the future movie/content. Having said that, I think what you may be missing a little is what I see as mythology that is actually being used in the new content. To me, they're using more of a cowboy/western mythology, or even to go back a little further, mythology of the knights and samurai, than that of the mythology of magic, wizards, and gods. To me, Star Wars works well with both, and that is why both the sequel trilogy as well as the Disney Plus content has worked so well. But I think they are both types of mythology that are being infused into the Star Wars universe, and that has been what has made these shows so good and well received. And now that I saw all of this, maybe we don't disagree as much, but maybe it's a phrasing thing when you talk about it. A preference of mythology you would rather see in the content going forward. I will also say that I think anything new in general leads to speculation by the fandom. The one problem I think Disney has had is the backlash from the fandom menace. They have shied away from disclosing information about future projects, which leads to speculation by the fans. Good point. These are all good points, actually. Whereas the prequel trilogy, George Lucas was giving us behind-the-scenes photos and things that were being shot. I acknowledge that those were different times at the beginning of the internet and before Twitter, but I think that is as big an issue behind some of the speculation vacuum you find. Your friend in the Force, Patrick. You know what, Patrick? You are absolutely correct. And you make some really, really valid points. And you're spot on. Especially going back, having watched some of The Mandalorian today, you're right. It is all mythology, just different types of mythology. And thinking more about your comments, I guess I really enjoy what we're getting in terms of the live action Disney Plus streaming content. And, now we're getting this Book of Boba Fett show, which is, going to have a lot of the same type of mythology, criminal underworld bounty hunter, part of it. Maybe even less so of the Force aspect of it, seeing that, at least as far as we know, Grogu's not playing a prominent role, and he certainly had that connection to the Force and made that a part of The Mandalorian. But you're right. I'm looking forward to seeing the big movies again. I guess that's probably what I'm saying. I will be curious to see what live-action content we get that feeds more of the fantasy element versus the Western element of it. But you're right. There's a place for both of those mythologies within Star Wars that works, and I think it works the best when they're blended together and it's balanced. Right now, we're getting more of a balance towards what George Lucas was originally inspired by. A part of what George Lucas was originally inspired by, right? When you look at the Seven Samurai, when you look at the Western vibe of what George Lucas drew upon, but he also drew upon Dune. He also drew upon Flash Gordon, right? The fantasy element of it. So I'm very much looking forward to getting some more of the Force fantasy part of it in live action, since it doesn't look like we're going to be getting it in any theatrical releases anytime soon. So yeah, it's a matter of getting a lot of this type of content right now with the Book of Boba Fett and The Mandalorian, and a lot less of the other fantasy-driven part of Star Wars, which I'm assuming we are going to get more of in terms of the Force, obviously in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Not so much in Andor, but the Acolyte, especially, whenever that comes out. And probably quite a bit in Ahsoka as well, considering her connection with the Force. So, Patrick, thank you so much for the comments. Everybody, for the comments this week. I really do appreciate it. And that wraps up the show this week. Before I go, though, I just want to take a moment and remind you that if you want to support my Nerd World and the Star Wars podcast, I don't do Patreon, but if you're a reader or you know somebody in your family who's a reader and you like science fiction, I hope you'll take a moment and check out my EMBARK science fiction space opera series. 6 books available now, all in ebook, paperback, hardback, and audiobook. I'm currently editing the audiobook for book 6. I know that book 6 is out, and I haven't had the audiobook out yet. It's just been a very long year, and I'm hoping to get that done by the end of the month. As for what the story is about, I'll take a moment here and read you the synopsis for Book 1, which is available right now in ebook for just 99 cents. The ebook is just 99 cents, and you can get the first 3 books, which completes the opening trilogy of the series, for $3.99 in the ebook, which is a discount from getting all 3 separately. You can actually get the box set trilogy of EMBARK Book 1, Treasure in Darkness Book 2, and The Vanishing War Book 3 for just $3.99 in ebook. But if you want to just try the book out in ebook for Book 1, it's only 99 cents right now at Amazon.com. Search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK. Katha has found something, and humanity won't survive without it. The stars are now within reach as global corporations D-Corp and Entercon have made interstellar travel possible and spaceflight available to all humanity. But when an industrial accident inside D-Corp sets off an apocalyptic chain of events, all of Earth is at risk. Unaware of the growing catastrophe, headstrong Katha Morrow receives a cryptic message from her father, an aerospace engineer who died 1 year earlier. Meanwhile, the ruthless Sin Argam of D-Corp attempts to exploit the global evacuation and gain control. With the help of fellow pilot Taft Guardia, Katha uncovers a shocking discovery that may hold the key to saving humanity from the tyranny of D-Corp's evil leader. Do not miss out on this fast-paced and action-packed space opera epic. I hope you'll take a moment and go and check out my books. I would really appreciate it, and you can find out all about them and links to Amazon.com at mynerdworld.net. All right, that wraps it up. Thank you so much for checking out the show this week. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did recording it, and I will talk to you again next week.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.